Who is Jesus? The first part of Mark, especially from chapters 1 to 8, the Gospel of Mark in the New Testament, that question comes up a lot. Some people, or I should say beings, know exactly who he is, and then other people keep asking the question, who is this Jesus? Who is he to you? We know him as the Son of God, the Messiah, Lord, Savior, Son of Man, the Logos, the Word, the Almighty One, the Christ, the Bread of Life, Good Shepherd, Emmanuel, God with us, the Prince of Peace, the Lamb of God, High Priest, Prophet, above all prophets, the author and finisher of our faith, Light of the world, the Alpha and the Omega, our King. And we call him friend. We've accepted his claims, his words and his teachings, his miracles and his healings. We know who he is. And there are times when we're really glad we know who he is. Especially when we have those moments when we call out to him from a space of desperation, a time of trouble, in an emergency. That happened to me yesterday. I went for a run on Dictionary Hill. Next slide. Some of you may not be familiar with Dictionary Hill. Sits in Spring Valley. And I'm glad they call it a hill. I know they call Cowles Mountain a mountain, but of course, compared to the Rockies or almost any other mountain chain, even Cowles Mountain isn't that much of a mountain. But thankfully, they don't call this dictionary mountain, because it's really not. It's a big hill. But I went out for a run there for the first time, actually, after having lived here for over 20 years. My first time up Dictionary Hill. And even though they call it a moderate hike, there are some very steep places. So I went out for a run. And I have a GPS on my watch, and when I downloaded the information, my phone said it was 90 degrees when I was out running. I love the heat when I go out for a run. It's not the best environment for a run, but I like the heat. It only took me about 17 minutes to get to the top, but when I started coming down, I lost my way. I think there's another slide. Is this the last picture? Okay, go to the maps. Oh, there's another picture, Dictionary Hill. So the one on the left, you can just type in Dictionary Hill trail maps, and there are a number of different ways to get up there. There are a number of different trailheads around the base of Dictionary Hill. And the one on the left is the one that I was shooting for. Just go up, do a little loop at the top, and then boom, right back down. 17 minutes up, probably less than that on the way down. But it took me over an hour to get down. As you can see on the map on the right, this is the download from my watch, my running watch, as to the route that I took coming down. You can see I even went out into the streets. As I was coming down, after I had gone down the second or the third wrong trail, I had to come back up to a midpoint to get my bearings, and I was not doing very well. I started feeling nauseous, felt like I was going to throw up. I had water. I was still sweating, so I knew I wasn't in that bad of shape, but I had to sit down a couple of times. And then I would make another shot at it, go down the wrong trail, and then I got to a point where I actually had to lay down. I thought I was going to pass out. And it's at those moments that you're really glad you know Jesus. Have you ever been in those moments? Oh God, oh Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And there's not much more to that prayer. And I don't know if there needs to be. It was a real, oh Jesus moment. Now, I've run in some inclement weather. I think the hottest weather I've run in is 120 degrees. And I didn't have this problem. I've run in below freezing weather in the Midwest, and I didn't have any problems. I've run in dangerous areas. I've run in Cuba. I've run in Israel, places that may not be safe for an Americano to go running sometimes. I've run at an elevation of 14,000 feet at Rocky Mountain National Park, and I've never had an issue like this.
Isn't there only one road up and one road, same road down?
No, there are multiple. Yeah, there are a number of trails that go up. And I was on all of them. Actually, I was only on one going up and on all of them going down. You can see, so after my moment after my "Oh Jesus" moment, and I lay down, I was carrying water with me. I started feeling better, but I thought if this happens again, I can't be wandering around the trails. So I took the nearest trailhead, the nearest exit into the community, and I asked one person where Barcelona Street was. And you can see on the far right, at Barcelona and I think it's Ledgeville, that's where I parked my car. And every trail that I went down to one of the trailheads, I knew that wasn't Barcelona Street. So I had to go back up. See, every time you go down and you're lost, you have to turn around and go back up. Not all the way to the top, but to a midpoint. Now, if this happens again, I just need to get to my car. So the first person I met on Eucalyptus Street, he didn't know where Barcelona was. If you're familiar with the area, there's just a lot of little pockets of residences on different sides of the hill, and they probably just know how to get to their home. They don't know where Barcelona is. So I went down and around, and I found another gentleman just at the beginning of another trailhead, and he didn't know where Barcelona Street was either, because I was going to take the streets back to my car, out in the public where I could get to somebody who had a phone or call for help or whatever. I don't carry my phone with me when I run. I'm a minimalist. But I looked on the phone and we decided, hey, Barcelona's right over there. Just go up into the trailhead, stay to the right. I still went down 2 wrong trails on the way back, but I made it. I'm glad I know who Jesus is. And I'm pretty sure that there are times, though, when we question, when we doubt, we wonder, is this for real? Is Jesus for real? I mean, I was really hoping he was real when I was calling his name. I know he's real. But as we get to know him more and more, and he reveals himself to us, the deeper ways we interpret how he calls us to be and to live, how to treat ourselves and others, about kindness and mercy and forgiveness and grace, and humility, dang. Those are tough, aren't they? Sometimes we can struggle. We can struggle with all that. There are times, too, when we can be experiencing loss, grief, hardship, pain, disease, and perhaps our belief of him and our belief in him cracks a bit. Sometimes a lot. For some people, it falls apart. Jesus? Really? Who do you think you are? Well, we know, don't we? At least as much as we can at this moment. He is God and we are not. He is love and, well, we're working on it. Let's go to our text for today. Mark 6, verses 1 through 13. I'm going to concentrate mostly on this portion of the text. Mark 6, 1 through 6. And then we'll also look a little bit at the rest of the text through verse 13. Jesus left there. Where? Exactly. Thank you, Tina. You are on top of your game today. And as we read through the Bible, it's easy to just read it right through. But there are certain words and phrases that make us pause. Now, if you've been reading along the way, you know that he was in Capernaum. He was in Capernaum, and then he went to the area of the Decapolis across the Galilee, turned around, went back, and he, as we looked last week, had this incredible time of healing the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years and then raising Jairus, his daughter, from the dead. He was coming from there, and he went to his hometown, Nazareth, accompanied by his disciples. I read an article yesterday from Diana Butler Bass. She posts every weekend about the text, and I like the way she put it. He'd performed several miracles recently, which we just talked about. Talked about them last week, and he was being followed by astonished crowds who were seeking more. And he probably wanted the comforts of home. Have you ever been away on a trip and you just can't wait to get back home? The comfiness of it, and Jesus has been all over the place, and maybe he just wanted to go back home for a little bit. Wanted the comforts of home. To be with his mother, his brothers and sisters, the familiarity of a local synagogue, a home-cooked meal, some quiet. His closest friends came with him. Even if he wanted some downtime, he still went to the synagogue. He began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Some translations say astounded. Some say astonished by what he was saying. Must have been some sermon. I think I have to up my game a little bit. Not that I'm seeking to astonish you or amaze you or astound you, but hopefully what I share will give you pause. Will all help us think about who this Jesus is to us. A couple of translations say that they were surprised and wondered, where did this man get these things? They asked him, they said, what's this wisdom that has been given him? What are these remarkable miracles he's performing? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son? And in a sense, they're like saying, we've known him since he was a kid. We know his brothers, James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. And aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Who does he think he is? A point-counterpoint pattern develops in Mark's account in the first part of the book. Let's go to the next slide, and then possibly one after that. Here we go. If you remember, as we've been going through the book of Mark in our liturgy, we've come across some responses or some questions about who Jesus is. And the question is typically asked after he does something amazing, a miracle, a healing, or he does something that bothers people, especially the religious leaders. And there's kind of this point-counterpoint. In Mark 1:24, on the left are the times when Jesus exorcised demons, the evil spirits that were bothering people. Jesus arrested those demons for possession. Jesus arrested those demons for possession. Thank you. See, I remember it, Tina. And in a lot of these accounts on the left-hand side, they make this proclamation before Jesus even does anything. In one of them, they saw him from afar off, and they began saying, What do you want with this Son of God? They knew who he was. I know you are the Holy One of God. In Mark 1:34, he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. In 3:11, you are the Son of God. And same in Mark 5, verse 7. You are the Son of God. These evil spirits seemed to know who he was and from where his power, his power came from. Here's the human question. In Mark 1:27, just a few verses after the demons cry out, you are the Son of God. In 127, what is this? A new teaching and with authority? And the religious leaders were like, who are you? Where do you get your authority? Where do you get off teaching like this and saying these things? And Mark 2:7, why does this fellow talk like this? He's blaspheming. Who does he think he is? Who can forgive sins but God alone? Jesus was telling people your sins are forgiven. Only God can do that. Are you saying you're God? What a joke. In 4:41, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. These are his disciples after Jesus calms the storm in the middle of the lake. Who is this? Who is this Jesus? And then in 6:3, we just read it. Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son, the brother of his brothers and his sisters with him? Who is this Jesus? This alternating pattern of declaration and question forces the reader, I hope forces us, or nudges us to ask why the human characters cannot see and to wonder if they ever will see. What will it take for humans to recognize, as the demons immediately do, that this is the Son of God? The first half of Mark's gospel, up to chapter 8, has its direction or agenda to ask and answer the question, who is this Jesus? Let's reread that first section of Mark, and we'll spend a little time here on the next slide. Jesus left there, Capernaum, and went to his hometown of Nazareth, accompanied by his disciples. And when the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue. And many who heard him were amazed, astounded, astonished. Where did this man get these things? They asked. What's this wisdom that's been given him? What are these remarkable miracles he's performing? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. In the Message paraphrase, Eugene Peterson uses the phrase, who does he think he is? And we kind of get this feeling, don't we? And we're going to see as we unpack this, that they thought they knew who Jesus was. Who does this upstart think he is? We know who he is. He's a nobody. Or maybe not a nobody, but he's just like us. We've known him since he was a kid. Or were they jealous? They're still stuck in backwoods Nazareth, and he comes in with all this great teaching and all this great power. Were they jealous? Is that why they took offense at him? Or did they think that they had him all figured out? Had him pegged as just a carpenter who left town and now comes back thinking he's all that in a bag of pita chips? Jesus is in his old stomping ground, and his townsfolk believe they know all there is to know about him and his family and his family's background. And they do know his family. They do know him. The people of Nazareth identify Jesus as Mary's son. The references to his brothers and sisters, most likely still living there, right there among them, it emphasizes that he or at least they think that he's simply a local boy. He's well known as a carpenter. Isn't this the carpenter? Everyone knows his brothers and sisters living right there among them, and they think they have Jesus pegged. This one is just Mary's boy. And oh yeah, wasn't there a few decades ago a little scandal about the birth? This one is just Mary's boy, who used to be one of us. He's just a TEKTON. That's the pronunciation of the Greek word used to translate into what we know as carpenter, TEKTON. I kind of like to pronounce it TEKTON. It's like Megatron, Neutron, but it's TEKTON. TEKTON. He's just a TEKTON. Traditionally translated carpenter, and it's someone who could work with wood, metal, or stone. He could be a builder, a mason, a carpenter. And in Jesus' Palestinian context, it probably denoted a woodworking handyman. He would have the skill to do almost anything, from crafting plows and yokes to making pieces of furniture, cupboards, stools, benches, to erecting small buildings, particularly making the beams, the window lattices, doors, bolts, you name it. Jesus must have been technically skilled and physically strong. He was the carpenter. The Greek word can also apply to a mason, a smith, or a builder in general. And in a sense, the declaration or the question is derogatory. Isn't he just a carpenter? Meaning, isn't he a common worker with his hands like the rest of us? They saw no reason to believe that he was different from them, much less that he was anointed and appointed by God. Isn't he a carpenter? It was a good, honest trade, but that doesn't match up with his divine claims. We know who he is. He's just a TEKTON. Their thoughts and ruminations about Jesus imply some annoyance. Who does he think he is, going around and preaching and healing? Is this not the brother of those we know so well, and we know they get into trouble? Are not his sisters living here with us? That familiarity. Their questions are phrased in such a way in the Greek to expect the answer yes. They weren't asking, was he a carpenter? They were basically saying, he is a carpenter. Isn't he just a carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son? To which everybody would answer yes. The upshot of their analysis of Jesus' origins is that they are, in one sense, scandalized by him. They don't necessarily seem to be put off by what he taught, intrigued, it says amazed, but their questions have to do with his origin. How can this be what he's saying and what he's doing? That doesn't match up with who we know him to be. The questions have to do with his origin, and they think they know this one person, this Jesus, and where he comes from. There's nothing phenomenal or rare about Jesus' family or trade. His humble origin makes him implausible as some great figure of wisdom. How can someone so ordinary do marvels and speak wisdom? How can this one so familiar to us be God's anointed? It's almost as if they themselves admit that nothing good can come out of Nazareth. We find that phrase, that quote in John 1:46. Nothing good can come out of Nazareth. Perhaps familiarity breeds contempt. The people in Nazareth know Jesus from a worldly point of view, a personal point of view, a we've grown up with you point of view. And their very familiarity with him is a hindrance to knowing him truly. For it makes it all the more hard for them to see through the veil of ordinariness. Their thought of who they thought they knew who he was blocked them from seeing him from who he really is. They see him as only a local yokel. Did anybody ever heard that phrase before? A local yokel. Like themselves, he's just a TEKTON. Nothing against carpenters. As a matter of fact, we want the best TEKTON we can find in our build-outs, right? Give us a TEKTON, a TEKTON, a Megatron general contractor. So nothing against carpenters. It's just ordinary. But we want an extraordinary one. Maybe Jesus, the ultimate TEKTON, will find us the best. Jesus returns to his hometown in the Galilean hill country where he grew up. In the synagogue, people are amazed. The locals simply don't know how to cope with him, though. They've heard what he's been up to in other places, the profound words, the teeming crowds, even the miracles. But where does he get all this power and wisdom? Who is this Jesus? If his family thinks he's gone off the deep end, if his family thinks that he's mad, you remember a few weeks ago in Mark 3, in verse 21, when Jesus went into the house and had a meal and his family came to get him because they thought he was losing his mind. It's perhaps not surprising that the rest of the village struggled with his identity as well. They think they know him so well. He's just the local carpenter. He's just a TEKTON. He's Mary's son, and all of his brothers and sisters are here, and we know them, and they're normal, ordinary. They tick off their names, and some of the family members still, no doubt, living at the homestead, part of the family business. And Jesus, well, he's just the firstborn. He's just the first of the family. He went away last year, and now he's back. He looks just the same as ever. It's not as if he's come back with a degree or a good job or even a smart suit. Sure, he's gained a bunch of followers, but frankly, they don't look any more impressive than he does. Any self-respecting rabbi can make a better showing. But Jesus' visit to his hometown is a reality check for his family and friends. They thought they knew him. Good boy, good man, but only a local laborer. As it turns out, he's more than that. And God is more present than they thought. Jesus is in touch with a scary, unknown, mysterious power. I mean, the healings, the miracles. To acknowledge who he is, they would have to give things up, certain thoughts, certain ideas, certain conceptions or misconceptions. They'd have to give up the comfort of familiarity, tribal loyalties, the claims that they've had on him as childhood companions or family and friends. They'd have to look at him in a whole new way. And if they start following him like all these other people, they've got to leave the comforts of home. Well, maybe not have to, but a lot of the people who wanted to know more about Jesus followed him along the way. And their questions are contaminated by fear. These rhetorical gestures designed to preserve their status quo, to protect what Jesus seems to endanger, their fear of the unknown, their fear of losing the life they've built, their fear of losing the comfort and routine, and their fear of what really believing and trusting might cost them. In a sense, they're outraged, beside themselves. Who does he think he is? It's a far cry from the disciples' question in a similar moment of frightened amazement. when they said, "Who then is this?" It's nuanced. It's who is this? I mean, true, real desire to know, who is this? Versus, who does he think he is? Who is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? The disciples want to know. Most of the townspeople in Nazareth do not. Others do. The out-of-towners, the outcasts, people open and willing to follow and trust and to believe and to have faith. They want to know more. They want to know him more and to find out what he's all about. When Jesus says, "Follow me," it's like him asking, do you want to learn? Do you want to know? Sometimes knowing something new may cost you something. Opening their minds to who Jesus who Jesus was, it must have been deeply frightening, unsettling. Giving up what we think we know is scary sometimes. We don't know what might be required of us, what fissures might open in our families or circles of friends. We don't know if we're equipped to cope with the consequences. To move on what you're learning, to take action with the desire that's growing in you, especially in this case with Jesus. Where is that going to lead me? What is going to happen? And so often we resort to the easiest defense. We take offense. They took offense at him, we read. And it's what we do sometimes to protect ourselves from what complicates our safe and simple judgments. But I say, don't take offense. Go on the offense. Jump into the deep end. Find out what Jesus has for you. It could be scary. It will be scary. But what he offers is unparalleled. To all of this, Jesus has a response. Next slide. After that phrase, and they took offense at him, he says, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town. In other words, a prophet has honor except for when he goes home, among his relatives and in his home. He doesn't seem to have honor there. He could not do any miracles there. He's been miracling all over the place. But he could not do any miracles there, except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. Their inability to see who he really was, or their unwillingness to take a step of faith, a move toward belief and trust, their inability to do that cost them. What they thought they knew about him inhibited what he was able to do among them. There's a scripture in Ezekiel 2, 1 through 7, next slide, that I think Jesus had in mind as he said this, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown. The prophet Ezekiel is getting a message from the Lord, and it says, Son of man, referring to Ezekiel, stand up on your feet and I will speak to you so that you can speak to the people. And as he spoke, the Spirit came into me and raised me to my feet, and I heard him speaking to me. He said, Son of man, I'm sending you to the Israelites, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been in revolt against me to this very day. And the people to whom I'm sending you are obstinate and stubborn. Say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. And whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are a rebellious people, they will know that a prophet has been among them. It's almost like Jesus is saying, you people in Nazareth, I don't want to say you're worse than this rebellious people, but at least the rebellious people would know that a prophet was among them. You don't even know. He was amazed at their unbelief. I mean, if this is what Jesus was referring to, and if anybody picked up on it, it'd be like, oh man, really? Really, Jesus? And whether they listen or fail to listen, for their rebellious people, they will know that a prophet has been among them. And you, Son of Man, do not be afraid of them or their words, no matter what they say about you or do to you. Do not be afraid. Through briars and thorns, though briars and thorns are all around you, and you live among scorpions, do not be afraid. And I don't think he's talking about the plant life and the wild animals around. I think he's talking about these are the personalities that are around you, briars and thorns and scorpions. Do not be afraid of what they say or be terrified by them. Though they are a rebellious people, you must speak my words to them, whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are rebellious. And in a sense, this ties in with the second part of the text. Because the Lord is saying to Ezekiel, whether they listen or not, you must say what I have for you to say. That Jesus sends out his disciples with the gospel, with the message. And he tells them there will be some people who reject you. Two Sundays ago, the disciples, well, not 2 Sundays in the text, but for us. 2 Sundays ago, the disciples were amazed when Jesus calmed the storm at sea. And last week, as I mentioned earlier, a family and presumably the crowd that they weren't supposed to tell about the miracle of the resurrection of their little girl were amazed when Jesus performed these miracles, raised the little girl from the dead, healed the woman from her hemorrhaging. In Mark's gospel, Jesus amazes many people, friends and foes alike. And Jesus uses this episode here in Nazareth as an object lesson for his own followers. Because in the second half of our text, we see that Jesus and his disciples don't stick around. And Jesus even says, in one way, to his disciples, don't stick around where you're not wanted. Move on. Find those ready to embrace the kingdom of God. And so he sends out the 12. Next slide. We'll read the last portion of our text and come to a conclusion. Then Jesus went around teaching from village to village. So we have this scene of Jesus returning to his hometown. Teaches in the synagogue. They're amazed, but they're beside themselves. He's just a TEKTON. They take offense in him, and Jesus says, I guess I'm not wanted here. Right after that, Jesus went around teaching from village to village. Calling the 12 to him, he began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over impure spirits. These were his instructions. Take nothing for the journey except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money in your belts, no carry-on bag, no checked luggage. Wear sandals, but not an extra shirt. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you, if any place rejects you, and if they don't listen to you, leave that place and shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. So they went out and they preached that people should repent. And they drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. The village, the Nazareth townspeople, didn't get on board. They couldn't buy into the vision of the future that Jesus was sharing with them. They couldn't buy into the vision of the future that was present in their very midst. They didn't buy what he was selling. So Jesus moved on. They have seen Jesus himself in the flesh, walking their own narrow streets and alleyways and courtyards, and they decisively rejected him. It's the rejection that will continue and deepen until Jesus faces his trial and his death. Ultimately, Jesus must face the scorn of his accusers, their rejection of him, and the contempt of the authorities as he goes to his death. Here at Nazareth, as he is rejected, and at the end of our text, he sends out his disciples, and he warns them at the outset that they will face rejection too. Maybe sometimes we halt or stunt our knowing of Jesus because we're too afraid of what it will cost us, what people will think of us. Nobody likes being rejected. Oh, I know Jesus enough to be saved. That's enough. What I think I know about him is enough. Any more would be just too scary. I'm not saying that we come to the point where we would say, oh, he's just a TEKTON. He's just a regular person. He's ordinary. He's just a carpenter, like the townspeople were saying. Oh, we've seen him grow up. He's a regular person. I've known him for a long time. Hopefully, Jesus has not become ordinary to us. It's amazing. We talk about intimacy with Jesus, and it's all about relationship. But we have to balance that with not becoming too familiar, in the sense that we think we know all we need to know about Jesus, and that's enough. I'm very comfortable right now. But maybe sometimes we get to the point where we think we know all there is about him. We've got the I know Jesus box checked. Said the prayer, got baptized. Check. Whew. I'm glad that's all there is. But we know that's not all there is. And we don't know, we do know that we don't know all there is to know about Jesus. Jesus calls us to go further up and further in. To quote a line from C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, further up and further in. How can we do that? Further up and further in. Certainly in our prayer life. But we could read the Gospels to get to know him more, to let him reveal himself to us even more, beyond what we think we know. Read the Gospels slowly, not with an end date or a goal. Got to read my chapter for the day. Oh, done. No, but dig deep. Let it sit. Let it read you. Or read a book about Jesus, his teachings, and his kingdom. The Secret Message of Jesus by Brian McLaren is a good one. A More Christ-Like God by Bradley Jersak. Simply Jesus by N.T. Wright. Jesus the King by Tim Keller. I'll leave this portion of my notes up here in case you want to write it all down, Stephanie. I'm not calling. You ever see somebody? I love it. I love it, Stephanie. You're the best. You're the best. I'll leave this out. Pray for him to reveal more of himself, who he is for you and for all of humanity. Talk to him Have conversations. It may feel weird. Go sit down at your dinner table, your breakfast nook or whatever, and just start talking to Jesus. Hey, how you doing? It'll go deeper than that. But just conversations. Don't let what you think you know about him keep you from knowing more. Don't be afraid. Be amazed. Believe. Trust. Learn. Follow. No matter where it takes you. May we desire and act on that desire to know more and more about Jesus. Who is he? May we not let what we think we already know keep us from following him further up and further in. May we believe beyond our current belief. Ask for faith beyond our faith. And trust beyond our trust. One way to get to know more about Jesus is to do what he did and do what he tells us. And we're going to participate in communion together. And he said, do this odd thing of taking bread and breaking it and taking a cup of wine or juice and drinking it. Do this in remembrance of me. It's interesting at work, sometimes when we're on projects, we don't have a lot of time for conversation, but when we're just doing bay service at Home Depot, we have more time to talk. And I've noticed more and more, the talk is about food. My favorite restaurant, my favorite dish, and my favorite that. I have a friend named John, bless his heart, is a carnivore beyond belief, and he's proud of it, and he digs at me being a vegan. And the other day, I think I burped or something, and I can't remember what it was, but he said, "Oh, that's what eating a lot of kale will do for you." And I said, "John, how do you know?" Anyway, he talks about the brisket he's going to cook and all that, and I thought, wait a second, where am I going with this? Oh yeah, food. We remember, right? It's almost so complete, right? The aroma. I mean, first of all, I have it. Yeah, the preparing for it, getting it ready, the anticipation, the saliva, the mouth watering, and then the aroma, and you smell it, and you eat it, you taste it, you touch it, and all of those senses. It kind of makes sense to me that he would institute a meal for us to remember him by, because we remember that great lasagna. We remember the cookies that our grandma used to bake, or the sweet tea. My grandmother, "Why is this tea so good?" "I stir it with my finger," she says. We remember. May we not only remember, may we allow this meal together to pull us in deeper to Jesus. He took the bread and said, "This is my body. This is me." He took the cup. He said, this is my blood, right? Our very life source. It's who I am. And as we eat this, we remember not only what he did, but what he is doing and what he will do in us and through us and for us. The little us here in the living room and on Zoom, and even the little less Christians or believers, but the big capital U-S, us, the world, the universe, who he is for all of us, and who he will be. Let us not be too familiar. Let us be thankful for what we know of him. But don't let that become a hindrance to knowing him more. Let us go further up and further in. Jesus took the bread and broke it and gave thanks and gave it to his disciples. They passed it around to each other. They shared it. As we share together the life of Jesus, let us eat the bread. He took the cup and gave thanks. And he said, "Take and drink. This is the blood of the covenant. This is my blood, shed, spilled, given to you for the forgiveness of sins." Let us take and drink.